Hey, welcome to the Behind the Screen podcast. I'm Andy Benoit, my good friend Greg Cosell. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Greg, we're going to start. Let's start with Dallas Cowboys just to juice our ratings here a little bit. A lot of talk about them from almost for what they haven't done this offseason. You know, the whole all-in thing, and then they're not signing free agents. I don't know if everyone's pleased with that. Dak Prescott, his contract situation. Maybe let's put the starting point at Prescott because that's kind of where most starting points would go, is your quarterback. If he walked away after this year, let's say he hits the market next year, which is possible, where, does he reset the market, and what would happen to Dallas in that sense?
Boy, that's a great question, Andy. How old is Dak Prescott now? He's been in the league quite a while.
Yeah, he came in 2016 as a fourth-round pick. So in July, end of July, he will be 31 years old.
Yeah, look, he's a quarterback. So neither you nor I know about resetting the market. Quarterbacks tend to get paid. I think it was interesting. I thought Dak actually had a very, very good season and actually showed better movement ability this year than he had in recent years. But overall, I would describe Prescott as an executor and a ball distributor. I think that's what he's essentially become in his time in the league. I don't know if I'd call him a dynamic playmaker. As I said, he did give you more of that this year than in previous years, but I don't think I'd call him, I don't think I'd say he's a playmaking dimension at the quarterback position. I think he's more of a distributor. There's nothing wrong with those guys. Kirk Cousins is a distributor and an executor, and he's very good. There's nothing wrong with being that kind of quarterback. I think ultimately with that kind of quarterback, you need to be able to have some kind of meaningful run game. You need weapons. You need a defense that's pretty good. You need other parts to your team. To me, he's not the kind of quarterback that you have Dak Prescott and you're all set. He's going to raise the level of everybody and your entire team. He's a piece. He's a distributor.
It feels like there's almost two kinds of distributors. There are the, let's call them caretaker kinds, the bad distributor kind, and then the point guard distributor where they run the offense. And we'll call that the good distributor kind. Prescott, to me, seems like a plus level point guard if we're going by that metric. Yeah.
That's a great way to describe it, and I agree 100%. Maybe people expect more. Maybe Dallas fans expect more. Maybe they expect him to be at the level of, the Allens and the Mahomes and, a Joe Burrow when he's healthy. He's not quite at that level, and he's certainly not the style of quarterback that Mahomes or Allen is. So he's a... you always try to find the right words because so many words have negative connotations. And that's why I think what you just said really hits the nail on the head. And there's nothing wrong with being a really higher level or a plus executor of an offense and a plus executor of the pass game. That's what he is.
See, what's interesting with him, I do feel like with guys that we tend to think of as a piece to the puzzle at quarterback, there's some limitation involved usually with that. A physical limitation that the quarterback has, usually it's physical. With Prescott, he's not Michael Vick in circa early 2000s, but he's not immobile. He's a plus mobile quarterback.
Right.
Above average mobility. I know, like, when it gets to 3rd down and 10, he's not one of those QBs where I feel like you're holding your breath or you're just trying to live to punt from good position. You can see him make the plays on 3rd down and 10. What about it is with him then would you say makes him, because I agree with you though, he's more of a point guard quarterback if we had to put him into one category. I feel like he's a point guard that can occasionally hit a big three though.
I agree. Now, so because it's Dallas and because they're America's team and because they're a national team and everybody focuses on the Cowboys, ultimately you have to look at the rest of their team. Is he the reason that the Cowboys have not been able to, quote unquote, get to a Super Bowl, which of course is all people who are Cowboys fans want, all teams, fans of any team want. But with the Cowboys and with Jerry Jones and, everything that's involved with being part of the Cowboys, fan or not, the blame seems to go to Dak Prescott. I thought he had a very good season last year. would you say that the Cowboys as a team overall are a really good roster, a big-time roster?
I don't know if I'd quite say big time because that kind of makes me think maybe top 5, but I would say they're absolutely a good roster. Could you win a Super Bowl with this roster? Yes, I could see that happening.
Right. And that's why people immediately look at Prescott and view him as the reason that they haven't won a Super Bowl, which I personally think is a little unrealistic. I think he certainly played well this season. I thought he had one of his better seasons in recent years. I thought he was more efficient. I thought his decision-making was better. I thought he saw things better. I thought he was more consistently accurate. I thought overall he had a very good season.
Yeah, the tough part, the way it ended, I thought, and I know he wound up having 1,000 yards passing in the Green Bay playoff loss. Function of the flow of the game, though. I thought the film on that one, critical game was really, he came off reads a little quick, didn't see things the way he normally does, could have been intercepted 4 or 5 times in that game.
Right.
And, does that carry more weight, the whole, win the big game? How do you put more weight in the performance in the playoff game this year than you would a regular season game for how you evaluate Prescott?
Well, and I think you always do, but trying to remember the game in detail, that was also a game where their defense really let them down. And they were down big relatively early. I think I can't remember all the details, but they lost the flow of the game. Now Prescott was responsible to some degree for that, but even if your quarterback's not playing at his absolute best, and I don't think he did in that game, you're not expecting to be down. I think they were down at 1.28-7 late in the second quarter, were they not?
They were down 27-0 at just under the 2-minute warning. They got a touchdown in the final play of the first half. So they went in down 20. It felt like they were down 50 the way the game had flowed.
Correct. So again, I'm not absolving Prescott of any blame for that first half. As you said, and very fairly, he certainly was not at his best. And that's all people are going to say. They're going to say, hey, great regular season, you get to the playoffs and he didn't play at his best. That's ultimately, you can't argue that. So where do you go with that? So do you say, okay, we need a new quarterback? That's always easy to say. And a lot of fans say that about their team's quarterback when it doesn't quite work out for whatever reason. But as you and I both know, good quarterbacks don't just fall out of the sky. So let's say Prescott leaves. Who's the Cowboys quarterback? You're starting over.
That's the heart. I mean, I think people would say Trey Lance. You take a look at that, but that's not. This roster isn't built to experiment with a young QB right now. This roster's built to get that Super Bowl drought ended.
Correct. And I don't think Jerry Jones would ever view a season as we're rebuilding and we'll be okay going 6-11.
So the free agent thing, that doesn't bug you, right? I mean, it doesn't bug me that they didn't sign anybody in free agency this year. I guess they signed, I don't want to say nobody. They did get Eric Kendricks, who's a good player.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they needed linebackers because Vander Esch retired, and they were playing with Bell, number 14, last year, who's probably really a safety trying to play linebacker. So, they needed someone in that position. They get Diggs ideally back this year to play corner. It's look. You know how it is in all sports when it's the free agent period. Every fan of a given team wants them to go out and make a big signing. They did lose Tyron Smith. My guess is they'll move Tyler Smith from left guard to left tackle because that's the position Smith played in college. And I'm sure when they drafted him in the first round, they probably saw that transition at some point taking place. And it's certainly easier to find a left guard than it is a left tackle. So I think Smith will play a left tackle. That you can always debate that. And because they haven't won, it's easy to say that they need to go out and get a lot of players.
With Tyler Smith, so I know you and I, Greg, have been in agreement probably for close to 10 years now. And tell me if your mind has changed, but the difference between a left tackle and right tackle is not nearly as significant, if even existent. It's certainly not as significant as people would say. Do you still subscribe to that belief?
Yeah, I think it only matters for one reason and one reason only. It's the blind side. But as far as the players you're playing against and the way teams play defense now, I don't think that there's any meaningful difference whatsoever between left tackle and right tackle. I mean, look at the pass rushers that come from the left side of the defense, just to name a very few. You probably, off the top of your head, could name even more. T.J. Watt, Nick Bosa. I mean, like I said, those two names just popped right into my head. There's many, many more. So, 10, 15, when you were starting out, Andy, teams and evaluators and coaches would always talk about left tackle feet, as if the right tackle, didn't need good feet. And the game was different then. But now your right tackle better be able to one-on-one pass protect. The bottom line is, in this league, if your tackles can't pass protect one-on-one, either right or left, you have limitations in your pass game on critical down and distance situations.
So, all right, that's how we see left tackle versus right tackle. I'm in agreement with you on that. What about left guard versus left tackle? The difference in the value of those positions. I'm trying to tie it to Tyler Smith here. Part of me thinks, do you take someone like, unless, Smith's not the greatest example because he's been a little bit up, he's a talented guy, he's been a little bit up and down in his career, but do you take someone who let's say you believe he could truly be a top 5 guard for next 3 or 4 years? Why do you tinker with that guy to make him maybe a top 10 tackle? Is a top 10 left tackle more valuable than a top 5 left guard? Let's ask it that way.
Without getting into top 5, top 10, I'd answer it this way. I think that the ability of tackles to pass protect one-on-one is more important than the ability of guards to do so, because guard, center, guard can always have, not always, often have some kind of help. Now, obviously, the defense, by what they do, can dictate one-on-one matchups. They can do a bunch of things with pressures. But there's also a lot of 4-man pass rushes in this league where your center and 2 guards are essentially going to be responsible for 2 guys, and your tackles have to block one-on-one. And I think, I think in those kinds, when it's 3rd and 9, I think your tackles have to be able to protect one-on-one. So I would argue that tackle, if they believe he can play left tackle at a reasonably high level, whether you want to say it's top 10, top 12, top 5, whatever, some kind of meaningful level, then I think they'll make the move.
All right. For the discussion's sake, let me make the counter argument to it. The move to say, let's keep, if he's a good guard, let's keep him at guard. The counter argument would be, for me, it'd be one, I think defenses with their fronts anymore dictate one-on-one matchups inside more than they used to, especially with
Correct.
all the 5 down fronts. You would agree with that?
Yeah, I did. Well, that's why I said defenses can do that for sure.
Yeah. When defenses start doing that successfully, your recourse for helping your guards can be more limited than helping your you can't chip block a defensive tackle very easily.
Correct.
You're willing to let your back release inside through the traffic into his route and use him as a chipper, which teams have done. That's been an Aaron Donald game plan.
And that's why football is such a great sport, because there's so many ways to do different things and ways to attack and ways for an offense to respond. And theoretically, even with a 4-man D line, if the 2 D tackles are basically 4 eyes and they're wide as D tackles, and you want your center to slide to one side or the other. Let's say it's Chris Jones, who's one of the 4 eyes, and you want your center to slide there. Your guard opposite the slide is still going to be one-on-one with the other defensive tackle. So yes, you can force offensive guards to have to pass protect one-on-one. So really the question becomes, who do they feel? Do they feel they can get a better left guard, or do they feel they can get a better left tackle? And maybe the draft will dictate that for them.
Well, and we've moved this beyond a Tyler Smith discussion. We're just talking evolution of football and the positions at it now. Here's the other thing I think that gets lost. You and I have been doing it right here. When we talk about linemen, we tend to focus on pass protection, which basically in that case, we're talking about linemen as really high-end insurance policies then. They're there to prevent sacks, if that's what we're going to talk about.
Right.
Prevent sacks, prevent pressures. You're still running the ball 20 or 25 times meaningfully per game in the NFL. And those first down snaps, I think, are more to a certain degree. Third down and long, yeah, you need to convert some of those, but you're less than 50%. The best offense is barely 50% conversion rate in the league every
Right.
year, long. So, your odds are not good. You're playing to the defense's hand. Where offenses establish and assert their identity comes on early downs, first down, second down. So between that, you're running the ball 20, 25 times a game. The offense's identity comes from pretty much your passing game on early downs and how you get to it. Your guard can give you a lot more. It feels like in most schemes, your guard gives you more texture in the run game than your tackles do. The only team I can think of that uses the tackles as the feature blockers in the run game would be maybe Baltimore and probably Buffalo now with the way they pull the tackles sometimes. But it feels to me like a lot of gap scheme runs and even the wide zone stuff, guards are the bigger difference makers.
I think that's fair. So which gets to your point that, maybe you don't want to move him. I mean, you have to decide, ultimately what's more important to you. Because, yes, you do establish your identity on early downs, but I think we would probably both agree that if you can't convert third downs, it's going to be hard to play overall. And the last thing offensive coaches want to do, as you well know, is feel that they have to keep a tight end in or keep a back in, or because that starts to limit what you can do in your pass game. So there's no right or wrong answer here. It's a great discussion. Teams probably have it. But, you do, if you're not converting third downs, you're going to have a tough time. Obviously, your offense does not stay on the field. And it's easy to say, well, first down's more important. If we can get 7 yards on first down, we're not going to be in tough third down situations. Well, of course not, but that's unrealistic to assume you're going to get 6 or 7 yards on every first down.
Let's go to another team and actually they've been very good on first down, is the San Francisco 49ers. And one guy, it's interesting to me, the Brandon Aiyuk discussion. They're trying to get a contract worked out with him. Numbers, marketplace, all that stuff. That's let's save that for another day. Just talking Brandon Aiyuk conceptually, because I've been watching the 49ers pretty closely lately, Greg. I've found him to be a lot more integral in their offense than I would have guessed. And I'm curious how you see him. Debo has his own role. Obviously, McCaffrey does. Where does Aiyuk fit in the Niners offense if we had to rank their skill players in terms of value? Maybe we do it that way.
Well, I think Aiyuk's important because I think he's actually the receiver on their team that wins the best one-on-one. I think Debo is more of a schemed player. And again, this is no knock on Debo because offenses do scheme. All offenses scheme, to get guys open and available. So it's no knock. But I think within the context of how they run their offense, Aiyuk is the receiver that is asked to win more one-on-one than Debo is. So I think he is important because you do have to be able to win one-on-one at some point.
The fact that he seems to so perfectly fit the way Kyle Shanahan would want to play, where he wants big, strong receivers that can generate yards after the catch. Does that increase? Obviously, it increases his value to the 49ers. Would that get reflected in his market value overall, you think? Can he get paid more money by San Francisco because he fits the way they want to play so well?
I would bet in the league that he's seen as a good receiver who's very much a function of a really good offense as opposed to an elite receiver that would automatically function everywhere. That would be my guess as to how he's seen. And I think it's hard to separate the two. Like, you and I are just watching him on tape. We're not necessarily, doing the other things, watching him in practice, seeing all those other things that teams know about. But, obviously you're dealing with a 49er pass game that's extremely well schemed, that really knows how to attack defenses, put players in conflict, that have multiple responsibilities, in zone or run pass responsibilities. Kyle Shanahan may be as good as anyone in the league in doing those kinds of things. So Aiyuk is to some extent a function of that. Obviously, they're tremendous with their motions and their splits. So while I happen to like Aiyuk a lot, I don't know if he'd be seen as a top 5 or 6 receiver in the league, despite the numbers.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. So that's what makes this interesting. Then is basically Brandon Aiyuk is at his most valuable in San Francisco's offense. That's probably the best fit in the league for him. With that being true, then how does that impact? And I'm not asking you, right? This is a theoretical question. We're just talking here. I don't expect a black and white answer from you. But conceptually, then, if you're negotiating a contract with your existing team, and it's the team that both sides probably know you are most valuable to out of all 32, I just wonder how that complicates contract discussions. Who gets the leverage in that case? Then is that on the team?
It makes it very complicated because there's no question that Aiyuk and his agents will believe that he's a top 5 receiver in the league and that he should be getting that kind of money. Now, they may accept that he shouldn't get, Justin Jefferson money, but that he should get big money. And the Niners would probably argue, and I'm not a negotiator. I don't know how those negotiations go, but I bet their point of view would be that, hey, we really want him on our team. He's really valuable to us, but he's not, as a solo artist, as it were, a top 5 receiver in the league.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. How would you rank their skill players in San Francisco? If you had to rank them 1 through 5, counting
in terms of importance?
Yes, value to the offense. Counting Juszczyk is one of them.
I'd say McCaffrey 1 and Debo 2.
Kittle or Aiyuk 3? Who's 3?
Yeah.
Which one though?
Probably Kittle because of the run game element, the way they play. And then probably Aiyuk 4. And Juszczyk's really important because they play 21 personnel. But at the end of the day, and I'm not saying anybody could do that because, no, not everybody could do that, as we both know. But he doesn't touch the ball a lot. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not really important, but he doesn't touch the ball a lot.
Yeah, I looked it up. Alec Ingold in Miami touches the ball the same amount as Kyle Juszczyk does.
Yeah.
About 1 out of 20 snaps that they're on the field.
I mean, look, that's like saying, how would you evaluate when Greg Roman was with Baltimore, the value of Patrick Ricard? I mean, he was really, really important in that offense, and he never touched the ball.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm surprised how much these top 5 players offense discussions, it feels like almost fanboy stuff, but I'm surprised that these, I've heard a lot of coaches, they have these exact discussions all the time, and they want to know at any point who are our top 5 players. We need to have these ideas ranked in our head because that kind of gives us the guardrails for how we game plan, how we install our whatever the identity we're building for ourselves ties back to who do we think our best players are. And
let me ask you this. You were with the Rams. Everybody knows that. I'm sure you've studied the 49ers offense in detail, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so my sense, and I didn't study it in the same detail you do. I mean, I do 49ers radio, so I've watched them every week for 12 years or whatever. And but my sense is in critical situations, however you want to define that, I sense that Kyle thinks more schematically how I'm going to get someone open, as opposed to I've got two great receivers that they're just going to line up and win one-on-one. Would that be fair in your mind?
Yeah, I think yes, I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. And that the question then becomes, if that's the case,
does that make their offense a limitation at some point?
Yes, I mean no. I'm not saying yes to the question. I get what we're discussing.
And I'm not saying, I'm just throwing stuff out right now. I'm not taking a side. But I mean, I'm sure when you have a quote unquote big time, like let's say you're Cincinnati with Jamar Chase or Minnesota with Jefferson. And I know I'm missing some receivers, so I don't want anybody to say, what about this guy? They just popped into my head right now. There's others clearly. There's not 10 more, but there's a few others. I'm sure you can think that, hey, we can line up Justin Jefferson as our X, and we can work 101 and we can win that matchup. We've got Justin Jefferson or we've got Jamar Chase. I'm not sure that that's the way the Niners think in critical down and distance situations.
No, and I agree with you. And so then it becomes, all right, when Shanahan was in Atlanta and he had Julio Jones. How different was that? Like,
Boy, I wish I could remember that. I thought that offense was incredibly well schemed, but I can't sit here and say that he didn't throw it to Julio 101 because that was a number of years ago, and I truly don't remember. So I don't want to say anything that would be wrong. And maybe they did go to Julio 101. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I sense right now that their offense is not built on matchups. One-on-one matchups.
No, it's creating the matchups for guys via the geometry of football is how they would do it. Yes.
Correct.
What's interesting though is, when I think of a true number one, like, and you're describing in these critical situations, the ability to put them outside and have them win one-on-one is an obvious one. I feel like more and more offenses move the guy around and understand that we can regulate the defense a certain way when we do that. So I'm almost interpreting your question as, do the 49ers, who is their regulate the defense guy?
Well,
who would they move around to get predictable defensive looks from? And I don't know.
Because Aiyuk's usually not the motion guy. So I think they try, and sometimes McCaffrey, because I think he's trying to win the leverage game as opposed to just the let's line up one-on-one game. I think through splits, through motions, they try to win the leverage game. So, because obviously teams are going to play man. It's not as if teams never play man, but they don't just line up, with, let's say, a wide X and a wide Z and say, okay, let's just, I don't want to say never, and let's just run routes and win one-on-one. They try to create through motions, through formations, ways to, create leverage. I mean, the Rams do a lot of the same thing, and again, I'm not saying Cooper Kupp's not a great receiver. You know him better than I do, and I think he's understands route running as well as any receiver in the league. But, they do the same kind of thing with their cut splits and their motions and all the, I remember breaking down plays this year in the matchup show with the Rams where they had, shifts, then a motion, they do all kinds of things to try to create leverage for their receivers to be clean and to have room to separate.
So what's interesting with these is so often with stud receivers, you're regulating or you're impacting the defense by deep. You're impacting the defense by threatening to take the top off the defense. With the 49ers, they don't play that way. They don't have that vertical guy where they're just going to threaten you deep every time and then beat you. They make you defend the field horizontally and go at you that way. What's interesting, though, is in my mind's eye, having just studied some of these plays, there are also instances in the game where you can tell they put it was Chris Conley for them last year, the former Chief receiver, who's a better runner than I realized. He can actually stretch the field a little bit. They put him in the game, have him run full speed downfield. Someone still has to guard that guy, and I think that's what they understand is maybe you don't need a Justin Jefferson in order to regulate the defense deep. You just need someone who can run from A to B, but really where you attack a defense is underneath and stretching it horizontally.
Look how many times someone like Juwan Jennings, who, by the way, when he came out of Tennessee, I loved him as a physical I loved him for how he's being used in the league. Because I remember he ran a 4.7 something 40. But how many times do we see him run those routes on third down where he's in motion or he's in a reduced split and he wins because of leverage? He wins because, of how the defense has to line up to defend him, whether it's man or zone, and it's 3rd and 6 and he gets 8, and they move the chains.
No, those he is great on those underneath outbreaking routes. I remember hating him for it a few times, watching him. Like, if I had to answer your question, how you would rank the players, I think I'd have Debo ahead of McCaffrey still.
You could, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. But I just think because they are a running football team and it starts that way, that's the reason I think McCaffrey is so critical.
Yeah, and that's fair. So I guess I'm thinking of when I answer that question, that's totally fair. If it's 3rd down and 5, who's most critical? What scares me about Debo is he can make you wrong when you're right. He can break your tackle. McCaffrey's not a tackle breaker. He can make you miss, I guess. But
McCaffrey, I think, is a tougher runner than he's given credit for. But more often than not, on 3rd and 5, they're not going to hand off to McCaffrey.
No, but I'm saying even in space, if let's say he catches a choice route, McCaffrey catches a choice route, I would sooner believe Deebo Samuel runs through the tackle than McCaffrey does, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Cody Schwartz sent me a great Jawan Jennings thing the other day. I'm finding it. So he wrote here. Cody will text me these things at the weirdest hours, late at night. 18 years of PFF data. There were 6 guys who made the NFL with a 4.740 time or higher. The 2 of them you would probably know, Greg. Ernest
Anquan
Wilford.
Bolden ran a 4.72 at the combine.
That Bolden's the other one. Yeah, I was going to say Ernest Wilford was a 4.81, which that's still good by regular people standards. Anquan Bolden.
Andy, I ran a 4.8 my freshman year in college. We had to get time for baseball.
You got time for baseball?
And I ran a 4.8.
Why did they have you run 40 yards instead of, like, wouldn't it be 30 yards if it's baseball?
I can't answer that. I was a freshman. Coach said we're doing 40s. It's okay, Coach. I didn't ask why.
Was it a 4.80 exactly?
It was a 4.8. Yeah, 4.80.
So you want the world to know you're faster than Ernest Wilford.
I was when I was 18.
Jennings is the other guy who was a 4.7. Very few of them. Again, 6 guys. It looks like. Yeah. So let's talk corners real quick in the draft. In fact, here's a transition for you. Tell me if you agree with this. Our friend Matt Millen, I think, was the one I heard this from. His argument, he made the point: speed at receiver, if you're skilled enough, can be vastly overrated because the corner still has to play at your speed anyway. So whether you're fast or slow, the cornerback has to adjust to you, and therefore if you can get open through other means, if you have the nuance of the route running or the size, that is every bit as vital as having the timed speed. Agree or disagree?
Agree. I think pure speed is somewhat overrated, because of the combine and how it's become such a big deal. The 40-yard dash time has become really big, and people focus on that. But
we just focused on that too, by the way, Greg.
We did. But it's been But Anquan Bolden was pretty good, and he ran a 4.72.
Yeah.
So yeah. Cooper Kupp's pretty good, and he ran a 4.62. So I don't know how many times in this league. Think about this, and of course it does happen once in a while. I'm not going to say it never happens. But how many times do you see a receiver meaningfully run by a corner where literally he just leaves a corner in the dust? I mean, obviously there are deep balls where the receiver wins, but the corner is still, relatively right there. It's just a really good throw and a good catch, and it can be a touchdown. But you don't just see receivers just burst by corners. That would reflect the difference between, let's say, 4.28 and 4.41, where, oh my God, they're 5 yards ahead of them. You rarely see that in the NFL.
No, you do. In fact, I actually went through all of the 30-plus yard catches one year, and the number of times that a corner just got run by, I think it was 3% of those plays. If I'm trying to.
There you go.
Yeah, it was an unbelievably low number.
Yeah,
it was always that. Yeah,
the pure. I mean, look. You were at the combine, Xavier Worthy ran the 4.21, okay? Set the combine record. I'd watched his tape last summer, and I'd watched his tape this year. You know what? I didn't need to see that. He could have run a 4.29, and it would have been the same thing because the tape tells you that he's fast. So ultimately, that's what he is. He's a fast receiver that has vertical ability. Now, he's a little more than that. I like the player, but ultimately, it's if a guy's fast, he's fast.
Yeah.
I mean, the 40 time doesn't tell you a ton in terms of how he plays the game.
Well, no, because he's not even wearing the pads or thinking about anything or having to deal with his peripheral visions. It's 4% of those plays where a guy just running by another guy.
Big number. And by the way, as you probably know, because you've been watching tape for so long now as well, a lot of these straight line fast guys, they have trouble stopping. And that's a really important trait for a receiver is the ability to stop. And whether it's to stop if they're running a route, a stop route or a hitch or a longer hitch type route or a curl route, or even just to stop to break, they have trouble stopping. They're very fast in a straight line, in a linear straight line, but they have trouble stopping.
So the guys that have to guard these receivers, the cornerbacks, let's talk about them in this draft because that's a position we've talked about quite a bit. We've gotten into some of the veteran corners in the game, but take us through, Greg, the corners if I say who do you like most in the draft, is there a corner that comes to mind?
Well, I think the guy that probably intrigues me the most is a smaller school guy, a MAC conference guy, Quinyon Mitchell. Now, whether he's the first corner off the board or not, I can't speak to that. But he's 6 feet. He's 195. Getting back to our fun 40 time, Andy, he ran a 4.33. Okay, his athletic testing measurables were off the charts, but he plays with speed, with suddenness. He's a really good off coverage corner, but he has numerous snaps of press as well, both where he got physical and both mirror match, where he just let the receiver declare and then got into his either outside hip or inside hip. He's really built well. He's almost built like a running back. I found him to be the most intriguing. Whether he's the first guy off the board, I can't answer that.
How about the Alabama guys?
Yeah, Terion Arnold is a guy that a lot of people are talking about as potentially being the first corner off the board. He's a really good prospect as well. I mean, Arnold is also, he's not as big. He's basically 6 feet, 189. I think that what he's really, really good at is mirror match press man. And by that, I mean, you don't jam the receiver off the ball. You wait for him to declare his release and you just get into his hip pocket. I mean, he's got deceptively sudden feet and movement. He's really fluid with his hips. He transitions really easily. I really like him a lot. And the thing that teams will love, Andy, is this guy played the run like a freaking linebacker. I mean, this guy really wanted to be physical on the outside. He wanted to tackle. He wanted to compete, and even though corners are drafted mostly because of their ability to cover, that's the game. Coaches love, as you know, when corners are physical and aggressive and competitive.
And I think it's an underrated trait, by the way. I think that a lot of defenses are a notch above because their corners are willing to tackle. Kansas City Chiefs are just one that would come to mind.
Without question.
Yeah. The Missouri guys, Greg, you had a chance to look at them?
I haven't seen enough of them yet. The other Alabama kid, though, was KoolAid McKinstry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and your thought, where do you put him? Where do you see him?
I like him. I mean, he's a guy that, Alabama is one of those teams that plays a lot of press. So you see the Alabama corners play press because that's what they do. And he's really good in mirror match press. I thought he was good in off coverage man. But I thought that in terms of mirror match, his poise, his composure, he stayed in phase. He attached to the receiver through the intermediate and vertical routes. That's the strength of his game. Some people were concerned about speed. I guess he ran a 4.47 on his pro day, whatever that means, but that's really not a bad time for a corner. I think you'd want to go to a team with him where you do play a good amount of press, because I think that's really what he does at his highest level.
If you are a corner there's a coach that told me that when he scouts corners, and this is actually a coach that plays a lot of zone coverage, and he said when he scouts corners, the first thing he looks for is whether they can play man-to-man, because if you can't in the NFL, you have severe limitations. Maybe even it might even be the mark that knocks you out of the league.
Correct.
Can you play corner? Do you believe that? Can a corner survive in the NFL without being able to play man-to-man?
Maybe survive, but not be very good, and also it impacts the defensive coordinator's playbook.
Yeah, and that's why this coordinator probably looked at it that way. Even though he's a zone guy, he looked at it that way.
At some point, even the Gus Bradleys of the world who love zone and as you and I both know, a lot of these zone defensive coordinators are playing more man now because you have to. Because with the shorter passes and you can't get to the quarterback, you've got to be able to somehow disrupt the receivers. So you've got to be able to play some kind of press man. I mean, you talk to coaches, and basically if your corners are somewhat problematic, if your corners are limited in what they can do, then your playbook becomes limited. If your corners are not limited in what they can do, then your playbook expands.
Who are the other corners you like in the draft? Any of them?
Yeah, I haven't seen a ton of them yet. That's I'm working my way through that. So I'm trying to think of if I've seen other corners. I'm trying to see.
Let me ask you this, Greg. When you scout corners, are you watching every one of their snaps? Because there's so many of them you are. So you're not, do you do the same with safeties?
Yep. Safeties and corners, you've got to watch full games.
So let's say there's 40 snaps where the safety doesn't really do anything. You're just getting through those quicker then, but you're still seeing them.
Yeah, and sometimes that's true with safeties that play on the back end in college, that you can go through 20 snaps in a row and it just doesn't seem like they do anything. But to do corners and safeties right, in my view, and that's why it takes me a lot of time, and that's why that's a position. Safeties and corners are the position I'm sort of getting to now, Andy. That's full games, and I don't watch 2 games. I watch 5 games, and usually there's other players on the defense that I can watch at the same time, because corners you watch from the sideline, whereas hopefully that team also has a prospect who's a D lineman or a linebacker, and then I can watch him from the end zone copy. So hopefully I can kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone, as it were. But corners, you got to sit and watch games. Because corners, you have to see how they play when the ball's not thrown to their guy. That's really important.
Yeah, because great corner play is often at the heart of the ball not being thrown to their guy.
Yeah, because, if you look at corners' stats, good corners might have 7 pass defenses in a whole season and 2 interceptions. So, and they may have, depending on the style of defense, they might have 18 tackles. So you can't watch 27 plays or whatever it is and act like you know what the corner is. You have to watch the games.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I could talk corners with you all day, but we got a few more weeks to do this. We got a month left till the draft, doesn't it feel like?
And I'm just grinding, Andy. I'm in the grind mode now. I took a few trips, but now I'm just every day is I'm grinding. I'll be working on the weekends. Just got to get through these guys. A lot of guys.
Well, good. Well, we'll pick it up next week then. For my good friend Greg Cosell, I'm Andy Benoit. This is the Behind the Screen podcast. Go ahead and subscribe, and we'll see you soon.